What happens when a beloved Southern comedian finally gets pushed too far, and it happens live on national television? The answer became one of the most talked about moments in tonight's show history. And it all started as harmless fun. Before we get into the chaos that followed, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments what you think really went down, because trust me, you're going to want to hear this. Leanne Morgan walked onto the Tonight Show stage to thunderous applause. The crowd was electric, packed with fans who'd followed her for years, laughing before she'd even said a word. Jimmy Fallon greeted her with his trademark energy, arms open wide. Leanne Morgan, everybody. He cheered as the audience roared. It's so good to have you here. I've been watching your specials, and I've got to say, you're one of the funniest people working today. Leanne smiled warmly, settling into her seat. Well, thank you, Jimmy. That's mighty sweet of you. I'm just happy to be here. Jimmy leaned forward. So, your new tour is selling out everywhere. What's it like going from little comedy clubs to huge theaters? Leanne laughed. It's surreal, honestly. I remember when there were 12 people in the audience, half of them my cousins. Now I walk out and think, did y'all mean to come to my show, or did you take a wrong turn somewhere? The audience erupted in laughter. Jimmy grinned, loving it. That's amazing. And your comedy, it's so relatable. You talk about marriage, kids, everyday life. Where does all that come from? Well, Leanne said, I've been married over 30 years. I've got 3 kids, and honey, they give me more material than I can handle. My husband's the most patient man alive. He has to be. Jimmy chuckled. And you're from Tennessee, right? Small town roots. Yes, sir. Born and raised. Population about 2,000, and that's counting the dogs. The audience laughed again. But then the tone shifted. Jimmy's next question came out differently, sharper. So Leanne, he began, your comedy's very wholesome, very family-friendly. Do you ever feel like you're limiting yourself by staying in that lane? Some of the biggest comedians push boundaries, they go dark. Do you ever think about doing that? Leanne's smile faltered for the first time. Well, Jimmy, I don't think I'm limiting myself at all. I tell stories that are true to me. That's what connects with people. They see their own lives in mine. Right, Jimmy said, but he didn't let it go. But don't you think comedy's supposed to push buttons, make people uncomfortable sometimes? Leanne's southern drawl deepened slightly. I think comedy's about making people laugh. And there's more than one way to do that. I don't need to curse or shock anybody. My life's funny enough on its own. Jimmy leaned back with a smirk. Okay, but be honest, do you think clean comedy gets as much respect as edgier stuff? I mean, when people talk about the greats, they think of risk takers, people who made audiences gasp. The laughter faded. The air in the studio changed. Leanne's posture stiffened. Jimmy, she said evenly, I've sold out Radio City Music Hall. I've got Netflix specials that millions have watched. I think I'm doing just fine without making people gasp. Respect doesn't come from how far you push the line. It comes from connecting with folks. Oh, sure, Jimmy said, holding up his hands. I'm just saying there's a difference between being funny and being safe. And maybe he hesitated. Maybe your comedy's a little too safe. The room went still. Leanne's expression hardened. Too safe. Are you seriously sitting here telling me my comedy's too safe? I'm just asking, Jimmy stammered, his confidence slipping. I mean, you've got to admit, you play it pretty safe up there. Leanne leaned forward, eyes locked on him. Let me tell you something about safe, Jimmy. I've spent years perfecting my craft. I've played rooms where no one wanted to laugh, where folks sat there, arms crossed, daring me to fail. And I won them over every single time. Not by being shocking, but by being real. So don't sit there and tell me I'm playing it safe when you don't know the first thing about what it takes to do what I do. Jimmy shifted uneasily. Okay, I think maybe we're getting a little off track here. No, Leanne said sharply. I think we're right on track. You brought this up. Let's have the conversation you wanted. Jimmy tried to laugh it off, but the tension was thick. The band members exchanged uneasy looks. The audience sat frozen. No one was sure if this was part of a bit or a real confrontation unfolding before their eyes. Look, Leanne, Jimmy said, forcing a smile. I didn't mean to offend you. I'm just saying comedy's evolving. The landscape's changing. You have to take risks to stay relevant. Leanne raised an eyebrow. Oh, honey, she said softly, leaning back in her chair. Trust me, standing here as a 50-something Southern woman. Talking about menopause and motherhood in a world obsessed with shock value? That is the risk. The audience broke into applause. Loud, spontaneous, defiant. Jimmy's smile faltered completely. And in that moment, everyone watching knew this was no longer just another interview. It was a reckoning. Asterisk, stay relevant, Jimmy? Leanne repeated, leaning forward. My last special came out 6 months ago. It's still in Netflix. It's top 10. My tour keeps adding dates because the demand's that high. Tell me, what part of that sounds irrelevant to you? That's not what I'm saying, Jimmy protested quickly, his smile tightening by the second. I'm talking about artistic growth, evolution. Like, do you ever challenge yourself to step outside your comfort zone? My comfort zone. Leanne echoed, her tone suddenly razor-sharp. Even Jimmy flinched a little. You think talking about real life, about being a wife, a mother, and a woman in a world that stops valuing you after 40 is a comfort zone? You think that's easy? Jimmy opened his mouth, but Leanne wasn't done. You want to know what's actually safe, Jimmy? Safe is sitting behind that desk every night with a team of writers feeding you jokes. Safe is repeating the same late-night monologue format that's been done for 60 years. Safe is never standing alone on a stage with nothing but a microphone and your truth, wondering if the crowd's going to laugh or just stare at you. The audience went completely silent. A few people in the front row covered their mouths, unsure if they were supposed to laugh or gasp. Jimmy's face flushed deep red. Okay, he said finally, forcing a shaky smile. I think that's a little unfair. I work very hard on this show. I'm sure you do, Leanne said, her voice laced with biting sarcasm. But don't come at me about playing it safe when you've never had to do what I do. Stand-up comedy isn't safe, it's terrifying every single night. Jimmy tried to steer the moment back under control. All right, he said, nervously chuckling. Let's move on. Tell us about your family, your kids. But Leanne wasn't letting him off that easily. No, Jimmy, you started this conversation. You wanted to talk about my comedy not being edgy enough? So let's finish it. Jimmy glanced helplessly toward his producer offstage, but no help came. I just think, he said carefully, that maybe you're limiting your audience by keeping things so wholesome. There are people who might skip your shows because they assume it's all sunshine and rainbows. Leanne let out a short, humorless laugh. Sunshine and rainbows. Jimmy, have you actually watched my specials? Or are you just repeating what your team wrote down in your cue cards? Jimmy's silence said everything. That's what I thought, Leanne said, shaking her head. You don't respect what I do. You think because I don't drop F-bombs every other line or talk about sex and drugs that my comedy doesn't count. That it's lesser, that it's easy. That's not true, Jimmy insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. It absolutely is true, Leanne fired back. And you know what's disappointing? I expected that from some people, but not from you. You built your career on being likable, on being the nice guy. And now you're sitting here trying to tear me down for doing the exact same thing. Jimmy's jaw tightened. I'm not trying to tear you down, Leanne. I'm trying to have a conversation. No, Leanne said, her voice rising. "You're trying to make yourself look edgy by making me look soft. You're trying to prove you can ask the tough questions, that you're not just a softball interviewer. But you picked the wrong woman for that." The audience was transfixed. Some people had pulled out their phones, despite the no recording rule. Everyone knew they were witnessing a live television moment that would go viral before morning. "I think we should take a break," Jimmy said weakly. "Oh, now you want to take a break?" Leanne snapped. "Now that you've realized you've stepped in it." "No, Jimmy, you wanted this conversation in front of your audience. We're going to finish it right here." Jimmy looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. "Leanne, I apologize if I upset you. That wasn't my intention." "Your intention," Leanne shot back, "was to make me look like a small-town act who doesn't understand real comedy. But let me tell you something. I've earned every bit of success I've got. I've worked harder than you can imagine. And I don't need your approval to know what I do matters." "I never said it didn't matter." Jimmy tried again. "But you implied it," Leanne interrupted. "When you said my comedy was too safe, when you suggested I needed to push boundaries, to be taken seriously, what you were really saying is that I'm not enough." And with that, the room fell silent again, except for the low hum of the studio lights and the sound of a woman who refused to be belittled on her own moment. Jimmy looked genuinely shaken now. He'd done hundreds of interviews, handled every kind of awkward exchange imaginable, but this was different. Leanne wasn't flustered or joking anymore. She was standing her ground, and everyone in the audience could feel the weight of her anger. "Leanne, I think you're misunderstanding what I was trying to say," Jimmy began, his voice quieter now. "I have a lot of respect for you. I really do." Leanne tilted her head slightly. "Do you, though?" "Because respect means doing your homework. Respect means you don't invite someone on your show just to belittle their work. Respect means recognizing that there are different kinds of comedian, that they're all valid." Jimmy nodded quickly, his words tumbling over each other. "You're right. You're absolutely right. I should have prepared better. I should have watched your specials." "Yes, you should have," Leanne replied evenly. "But this isn't just about preparation. Jimmy, it's about how women in comedy get treated by interviewers, by critics, by the industry. We get asked different questions than men do. We get judged by different standards. And I'm tired of it." A low murmur rippled through the audience. Several women nodded, visibly moved, when a man gets on stage and talks about his family. His life, people call him observational. Relatable, brilliant, Leanne continued, her voice gaining strength. But when a woman does the same thing, she's told she's playing it safe, that she's not edgy enough. You see the double standard. Jimmy shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I hear what you're saying, do you?" Leanne pressed, her gaze steady. "Because I've heard it my whole career. People telling me I need to be more like this comic or that one, that I should be dirtier, meaner, louder, anything other than me. And for years, I believed them. I thought maybe my natural voice wasn't good enough." Her voice cracked slightly, raw and sincere. The crowd hung on every word. "But then I realized," she said, her tone soft but unwavering, "there's nothing wrong with me. What's wrong is a system that keeps telling women they have to change who they are to succeed. That our lives aren't interesting enough. That our experiences aren't funny enough. That we aren't enough." Jimmy looked down at his desk, his earlier confidence gone. "I never thought about it that way." "Most people don't," Leanne replied. "That's the problem. These biases run so deep, folks don't even realize they have them. You probably thought you were asking an honest question about artistic growth. But what you were really doing was questioning my entire identity as a performer." The audience erupted into applause, slow at first, then growing into a roar. Leanne gave a small nod of acknowledgement, but her eyes stayed locked on Jimmy. "I came here tonight excited to talk about my tour," she said, her voice calm but firm. "To share stories, to laugh with your audience. Instead, I found myself having to defend my choices, my style, my career. And that's not okay, Jimmy." "You're right," Jimmy said quietly. And for the first time, his voice sounded sincere. "I completely messed this up." "I'm sorry," Leanne studied him. "Are you sorry you did it, or sorry you got called out on it?" Jimmy hesitated, taking a long breath. "I'm sorry I did it. Truly, I let my own assumptions cloud my judgment, and I disrespected you. That was wrong." Leanne looked at him for a long moment, weighing the words. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the cameras. "Here's what bothers me most," she said finally. "I bet you've had male comedians on this show who do clean material. Jim Gaffigan, Brian Regan, Jerry Seinfeld. Did you ever ask them if they were being too safe?" Jimmy's mouth opened, then closed again. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. "No, you didn't," Leanne said. "Because they're men. And men get the benefit of the doubt. They get to be themselves without constantly having to justify it." The audience was spellbound now. What had started as a tense interview had transformed into a powerful, unfiltered reckoning on live television. "I'm not trying to destroy you,"
Jimmy,
Leanne said, her tone softening slightly. "I'm trying to make you understand what it's like to be a woman in this business. We have to prove ourselves every single day in ways men never do. We have to be twice as good to get half the recognition, and we still get asked if we're doing it right." Jimmy nodded slowly, humbled, his usual quick wit gone. The crowd erupted again, cheering not just for Leanne's words, but for the truth behind them. "I understand. Or at least, I'm starting to," Jimmy said quietly. "And I'm genuinely sorry for my part in perpetuating that." Leanne nodded once. "I appreciate that," she said. "But an apology isn't enough. Actions matter. How you treat the next female comedian who sits in that chair, that's what matters. Whether you've done your homework, whether you ask questions that show respect, whether you see her as an equal, that's what matters." "I hear you," Jimmy replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I'll do better." Leanne studied him for a long moment, then turned her gaze toward the audience. It was clear she was making a decision. "You know what, Jimmy?" she said, rising from her chair. "I appreciate your apology. I really do. But I don't think I can sit here any longer." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Jimmy's eyes went wide. "Leanne, please," he said, standing as well. "Don't leave. Let's finish this conversation." "We did finish it," Leanne replied, unclipping her microphone. "I said what I needed to say. You heard me. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend everything's fine now, just because you said sorry. That's not how this works." Jimmy looked panicked. His producers were motioning frantically from offstage, but there was no stopping it. This was happening live. "I respect your work. I really do," Jimmy pleaded. "Please stay. We can talk about your tours, about anything you want." Leanne paused, her hand on the mic pack. "Jimmy, the damage is done. You invited me here under the guise of a friendly interview, and instead, you questioned my credibility. You don't just get to move past that like it never happened. We can make this right," Jimmy insisted. "We can have a real conversation now, an honest one." Leanne shook her head. "We just had an honest conversation," she said. "And honestly, I don't want to be here anymore. I'm not going to promote my tour on a show where the host didn't even bother watching my work before criticizing it. That's not respect. That's not how you treat a guest." The studio was completely still. The audience watched in stunned silence, some with tears in their eyes, others barely breathing. "I've been in this business a long time," Leanne continued, her voice strong and unwavering. "And I've learned you have to stand up for yourself. You have to draw lines. And my line is this: I won't be disrespected. Not on national television. Not anywhere. Jimmy looked crushed. Leanne, I'm begging you, don't leave like this. Why not? Leanne turned to face him fully. Because it makes you look bad. Because people will talk about it. Maybe they should talk about it. Maybe people need to see what happens when someone gets disrespected, and there are consequences. It's not about me looking bad, Jimmy said quickly, though his voice wavered. It's about giving you a chance to share your work with the audience. They came here to hear from you. Leanne's expression softened as she turned toward the crowd. I appreciate every single one of you who came here tonight, she said sincerely. I'm sorry this didn't go the way any of us expected, but I hope you understand why I can't stay. One person in the front row began to clap, then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire studio was on its feet, cheering, applauding, some even crying. It was a surreal moment, an audience applauding not a performance, but a boundary. Jimmy stood frozen, looking lost. This isn't how I wanted this to go. Then you should have prepared differently, Leanne said calmly. You should have done the work. You should have respected me enough to actually watch my comedy before tearing it down. She handed her microphone to a nearby stagehand. The band was motionless. The cameras kept rolling. Can I say one more thing? Leanne asked, turning back toward Jimmy. Of course, he said quickly. Clinging to hope, Leanne turned to the camera, her voice steady, eyes fierce. To any young comedian watching this, especially the women, don't ever let anyone make you feel like your voice doesn't matter. Don't let anyone tell you that you have to be someone else to be successful. Stay true to yourself. Tell your stories your way. And if someone disrespects you, you have every right to walk away. The room exploded in applause, thunderous, emotional, defiant. People rose to their feet, clapping through tears. Leanne turned back to Jimmy one last time. I hope you learn from this, she said. I hope the next time a woman sits in that chair, you treat her the way she deserves to be treated, with respect, preparation, and the understanding that her comedy is every bit as valid as anyone else's. Jimmy swallowed hard. I will, he said softly. I promise I will. Leanne gave a small nod, then turned and walked off stage as the crowd continued to cheer. The sound of her heels faded behind the curtain, followed by an echoing silence. Jimmy stood motionless before slowly lowering himself back into his chair. We're going to take a break, he murmured into the camera. The show cut to commercial.